Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. Today we're going to shift gears a bit. Look, normally we dive deep into the world of property investment, but today's show is really about the most crucial capital we manage, money, and how your mind can help you accrue more of it. Now, I've got two, I guess I'd call them exciting segments lined up for you. In our first segment, I'll be taking a role reversal because I'm going to be sharing my mindset message with you at the beginning of the show rather than at the end. And I'm going to be explaining how a fascinating part of our brain, the reticular activating system, acts as both a search engine and a GPS, guiding us towards wealth. Something you really need to understand if you want to get to the next level. Then I'm going to be having a conversation with a guest who's been called Australia's best-kept money secret, Jacquie Clarke. She's here to discuss her new book, Stop Worrying About Money. It's a conversation you won't want to miss, filled with some practical wisdom to help you transform your relationship with money. So, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
In today's mindset message, I'm going to teach you a little bit about a part of the brain called your reticular activating system, but let me call it the R.A.S, R.A.S for short. Now, this will be a slightly longer than normal mindset message, but it's also going to be one of the more important messages I'm going to be offering with you. So it's going to teach you about how you can achieve the goals you want to achieve, whether they're financial, business, or personal. Now, I know there's lots of podcasts out there talking about money, about property, about success. But one of the ways I've tried to differentiate my podcast right from when I first started it was to also share with you ideas about the psychology of success. Why some people, despite having all the information and all the knowledge, still aren't successful, and how understanding this will help you. Now, when I realized the significance of the psychology of success many years ago, it totally changed my personal success in all areas of my life, but also of those people I've mentored and our clients. As I often say, changing the way you're thinking will make a significant change in your life. So please bear with me as I explain to you a bit about the reticular activating system, because it's part of the reason that some of us have got rich habits and others have got poor habits. Now, hey, that's a good name for a book, isn't it? And that's the name of the book I've written with Tom Corley that's become an international bestseller and has been translated into 5 languages. Now, way back almost a century ago, when Napoleon Hill wrote his book Think and Grow Rich, he became famous for saying, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the body can achieve. Now, that was a bold statement. It was a groundbreaking concept back then, almost a century ago. And to be honest, when I first heard that many years ago, decades ago, when I first read the book, I thought it was a little bit of metaphysical hoo-ha. But interestingly, science has proven Hill to be correct, because now we understand more about how our brain works, and in particular, how our reticular activating system, the R.A.S, works. It's a network of neurons in the brainstem. Now, the R.A.S is responsible for lots of things, including regulating wakefulness and sleep-wake transitions, but it's also playing a part in important human biological functions such as your pulse and digestion and awareness and cardiovascular functions. Now, hey, please put up with this, because you'll understand in a moment how that also has to do with money. You see, what's particularly important in the context of this discussion is the R.A.S's ability to bring certain things to your attention, since it's the portal through which all information gets into your brain. You see, your R.A.S is a filter. It filters the incoming information into your brain, and it decides what you're going to notice and which information isn't going to come to your attention. And interestingly, it includes all the input from all your various senses, other than smell, all the input the brain receives from the external world. It filters everything you feel, see, hear, and taste. So the R.A.S acts as a filter. Now, science suggests that our brain processes 11 million bits of information every second. But since only 30 bits of information can be processed consciously. It means that, 99.9% of the information that comes to you is unnoticed. Now, obviously, that's the brain's way of coping. And how else could it cope with this continuous flow of information coming in and demanding your attention? If you had to deal with all that information, you just couldn't cope, could you? For example, you're probably sitting down while listening to this podcast, or maybe you're walking, and you hadn't noticed up till now the sensation of the seat on your body, or the ground on your feet, or your breathing, or your heartbeat. Now imagine continuously being consciously bombarded with all this information. I guess that's why evolution has given us the R.A.S. It's a filter to extract and bring to your attention only the bits that are important at that moment in time. It's a sophisticated filter between your conscious and your subconscious mind, and it prioritizes what you need to know. Now, your R.A.S. responds to your name, to anything that threatens your survival, and to information you need to know immediately. The R.A.S. takes instructions from your conscious mind and passes it on to your subconscious mind, and then it instructs the body to take physical action to comply with the instructions from the R.A.S. But what I find really interesting is that the R.A.S. sorts through all this information from your environment and seeks data to validate your beliefs, and when it finds a match that validates your already beliefs, your conscious mind's alerted. Now, medical science has found that in some people the R.A.S. can't sufficiently excite the brain, not like it should be, and those people have difficulty learning, they've got poor memory, they've got little self-control. At the other extreme, some people have illnesses such as ADD and ADHD, where the R.A.S. is overstimulated, and these people have sensory hypersensitivity. They're hypervigilant, they suffer from constant talking, restlessness, hyperactivity. Now, apparently these conditions occur because of a lack of neurotransmitter noradrenaline in the brain. Okay, what's all this got to do with rich habits and becoming wealthy, you're probably wondering. As I said, the R.A.S. is a sophisticated filter that allows certain information into your brain and filters out other information. Hey, guess who programmed that filter? You did, and so did your past experiences. The R.A.S. screens the world through parameters that you gave it, and your beliefs form those parameters. And the R.A.S. helps you see what you'd like to see, and in doing this, it influences your actions. What this means is everything in your life is a reflection of your inner state. You are what you believe yourself to be. If you think people at work don't like you, your R.A.S. is going to point out every single bit of evidence that confirms that negative belief. As I've often said, your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions lead to your results, which really means that your outside world is a reflection of your inner world. Again, part of the reason that I spend so much time talking about the psychology of success and why our book Rich Habits, Poor Habits has become so successful around the world, because it teaches people to start to develop a different way of thinking and more rich habits. Anyway, the reason why you have to learn how to control and reprogram your R.A.S. is to create what you want. But the good news is you can reprogram your brain's reticular activating system to give you the success that you want. Now, this is very exciting because it means that if you get your thinking correctly aligned, you're going to be able to achieve amazing results. In reality, your R.A.S. acts as both a search engine and a GPS. And if you think about it, it's easy to see why that has evolved evolutionary-wise. Okay, so how does your R.A.S. act as a search engine? Your R.A.S. works like a search engine looking for what you've programmed it to look for. And that's why it's important to tell the R.A.S. what you want, not what you don't want, because when you program a specific idea or a specific goal into your reticular activating system, it'll keep searching for it. Doesn't matter whether you're thinking about it or not, your R.A.S. will work in the background until it finds precisely what you asked for. Just like the search engine on a computer, it's going to sift through all the data presented to it, those millions of bits of information every second, as I mentioned. It's going to edit out the irrelevant material and only select data, information that's relevant to you, and bring it to your attention. So again, that's why it's really important to create a clear picture of what you want and then allow your R.A.S. to start working until you find the information. So your R.A.S. acts as a search engine, but here's the catch. scientists have found that your R.A.S also controls your belief systems and will only recognize and select information that supports your preconceived beliefs. This means that your R.A.S is going to pay more attention to what you already believe or to what you already think, no matter whether the thoughts are right or wrong, and it's going to filter out all the information to help reinforce what you've already chosen to believe. And that's why, despite being exposed to the same circumstances, some people see money-making opportunities all around them, while others only see problems and debt and difficulty. Because of their preconceived belief in the way the R.A.S filters the information in the world, some people see all the good that rich people do and the charity that they give and how they help the world, while other people see wealthy people as evil and greedy. The way the R.A.S is pre-programmed means if you believe people are generally bad, every time you read the news, you're going to find tragedy, you're going to find crime, you're going to find death. But at the same time, other people are going to find opportunities. They're going to be opportunistic. They're going to be optimistic. They're going to see good all around them. For example, if you believe property investing is a great way to make money, your R.A.S will filter for opportunities. However, if you believe real estate investing is risky, your R.A.S is going to also filter for all the reasons why the same properties that others see as money-making opportunities could, for you, be potential problems, could be a risk, could be debt bombs. So as you see, your R.A.S can either work for you or against you. Now, let me give you another example that you're probably going to recognize better. Have you ever noticed when you decide to buy something, you see it everywhere? If you've decided to buy a white Toyota, you'll find white Toyotas everywhere. If you've decided to buy a new widescreen TV, you're going to see advertisements for them everywhere. This is because your R.A.S is working, filtering out only the important information and bringing the car or the item of your thoughts to the forefront. Now, I remember years ago when teaching my son Harrison to drive, we were driving down Nepean Highway, Elstonwick, and he was saying, "Hey, Dad, look at all the Toyotas around." And I said, "Where, Harrison?" "Look at all the Mercedes." We were both filtering for different things. Now, by the way, this doesn't matter whether you're awake or asleep. Have you noticed how new mums, they tend to be very tired, they've got broken sleep, but even when they get a nap, they can sleep through all sorts of noises around the house, but as soon as their baby stirs or as soon as their baby cries, they instantly wake up. So, as I said, your reticular activating system acts as both a search engine, and I've just explained how, but also a GPS. So let me explain that. If you think about it, when using a GPS, you don't need to know where all the roads are heading, where they're located. You just need to decide where you are, where you want to go, not necessarily how you get there, because you let the software do the rest. So you need to know where you are now, where you want to go, and the GPS takes it into account, and if you get off track, it puts you back in the right direction again, doesn't it? Now, interestingly, that's exactly how your reticular activating system works. Once you've decided on your goal, your R.A.S begins to filter out for everything connected with your goal, and it also filters out irrelevant information. And if you veer off track, it reroutes you. Now, a simple example of this is the R.A.S continuously filters for your name. You could be in a busy airport with lots of background noise, but if somebody calls out your name, or if your flight number is called out on the loudspeaker system, your R.A.S instantly picks it amongst all the other extraneous noise. But you know what? Your R.A.S isn't very clever. It doesn't know whether the destination you're wanting to go to is good or bad. It just knows your dominant thoughts. It knows what your dominant beliefs are. This means if you're continuously thinking about what you don't want, what you don't like, your R.A.S is being programmed to lead you to what you don't want. The problem is you're going to see so much of what you don't want, what you don't like, that sometimes you become a bit downhearted, despondent with what's going on in life. You don't think you're ever going to reach your goals. Now, according to the Institute of Neuroimaging and Informatics at the University of Southern California, the average person thinks 70,000 thoughts a day. But most experts estimate that up to 95% of those thoughts that you think are reruns of past events or recurring thoughts. And if you think about it, that's probably true. But that's why it's important to program your reticular activating system with rich thoughts, not poor thoughts, so you get what you want out of life. Now, of course, mental habits such as poor thinking, they're not easy to break. However, step by step, small incremental changes over time are going to create big shifts in how you view the world and how you view yourself. So that means over time you can reprogram your reticular activating system. With your self-talk, the thing, that little voice in your brain, and if you say, no, I haven't got one, that's that little voice in your brain saying, no, I haven't got one at the moment. With affirmations, I didn't believe in affirmations. I didn't believe in visualization and having a picture board up to what you want to achieve. When I first started learning about all this, it all seemed woo-rah-rah stuff, visualizations, self-talk, affirmations, expectations. But you know what? That's what reprograms your R.A.S. That's what programs your R.A.S. And that's what your mind believes. Your mind believes what you tell it. So take charge of it. The R.A.S. supports you when you set goals. And your mind needs goals. It needs to know where it's going to go. Your R.A.S. will help you see what you need to see. And in doing this, it's actually going to influence your actions. If your expectations are positive, you're automatically going to program your R.A.S. to see positive information and screen out negative information. However, without clear goals, your reticular activating system is similar to a confused personal assistant with no clear instructions from you, from the boss. Similarly, if you've got lots of negative self-talk going on, that's what you're going to see in the world. Isn't that interesting? And now you can possibly see why some people you know, maybe even somebody very close to you, keep seeing bad things out in the world while other people see good things. Now, over the years, I've recognized that optimistic people who see good things, are the ones who are most successful. But be warned, it's not as simple as Think and Grow Rich, that like the title of the book I mentioned right at the beginning. You have to do more than think. You've got to do more than just visualize. You've got to do more than affirmations. You have to take action. The key is to realize that the opportunities the R.A.S. are going to present you will be relative to your efforts. It won't show you the big opportunities right away. You're going to have to follow a trail, adopt some rich habits. Hey, if you want to understand more about the rich habits and the poor habits and the rich way of thinking and way successful people think, why not get a copy of my book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits? I wrote it with my co-author, Tom Corley. It's become a bestseller in Australia and in America. But interestingly, it's also been translated into 5 languages, including Polish and Chinese and Vietnamese, because people recognize the importance of developing rich habits. So the point I'm making is, if you want to develop rich habits and become more successful, you will do so by reprogramming your brain, and slowly but surely you're going to see more and more opportunities in front of you. Now, as I said before, when I first heard the concept of Think and Grow Rich, or what you think about, you become the most, when I was taught these concepts of visualization and affirmation, I thought it was all woo-woo stuff, all that for the metaphysical people, but not for me. But then I learned these concepts are backed by science. I know how reprogramming my way of thinking and developing rich habits has changed my life. So my suggestion to you is to be open to these concepts and the ideas that I'm sharing with you in these podcasts and in my blogs and in my book. So I suggest you work on developing rich habits, and then one by one, the small opportunities and then eventually the bigger opportunities are going to magically appear, because the search engine of your mind will find them, and the GPS in your R.A.S. will lead you there. Now, if you want to learn more about this, and especially about the rich and the poor habits, go to richhabitspoorhabits.com and get your own copy of the book. You can get an online version, a Kindle version, or a hard copy version, richhabitspoorhabits.com. And now I hope you understand a little bit more about the reticular activating system that is hidden in the base of your brain, but filters all the information that comes to you and controls what you see, what you think, and what you do. I hope you found that conversation about the reticular activating system interesting. I find it a fascinating part of the brain, and it's important to understand how we create our own future by the way we think, by the things we do. Now, if you found that valuable, and you're not already a subscriber to this show, please just stop for a sec before the next segment and click on the follow button or the subscribe button on your podcast app, wherever you're listening to this now, so you're going to get regular shows twice a week so you can get benefit from the various guests I have. And in a moment, we're going to have a talk with Jacquie Clarke about how to stop worrying about money. But before I do, we normally talk more about property in this show, so let me just quickly remind you that there's now sufficient evidence that we've well past the bottom of the property cycle and we're at the beginning of a new property cycle. And that doesn't happen very often. Now, even though we don't advocate trying to time the market, fact is most people would like to take advantage of this early stage of the cycle. If you haven't already bought, you've missed the bottom, but how long are you prepared to wait to get set? So why not contact my team at Metropole at metropole.com.au and have an obligation-free clarity consultation with one of our property strategists to discuss your goals and options. Now, the good news is the worst is over and the best is yet to come, so it's time to get your ducks in a row. But be careful. Property investment's a process, not an event. So you can't just buy any property. You can't just buy any property and hope to be successful. Formulating a property plan and getting the right advice is more critical than ever now, so go to metropole.com.au and have a chat with my team. Have a free clarity consultation to discuss your options. The cost of living has been soaring, interest rates keep rising, and this has put a lot of Australian household budgets under considerable pressure. If you're tired about worrying about money, today's show, especially for you as my guest, Jacquie Clarke, is going to provide some practical hints to dealing with life's most common and challenging financial obstacles. Jackie's been called Australia's best-kept money secret. As a personal wealth and money management expert, she's got over 3 decades of experience helping high-net-worth families, individuals and business owners to build, manage and preserve their wealth. Jacquie's an acclaimed full-service financial executive and co-founded a highly successful boutique accounting firm called Maxima Private, in addition to her own consulting business. So she's eminently qualified to be able to handle these type of advice. So welcome, Jacquie.
Thanks, Michael. It's lovely to be here today.
Well, Jacquie, there's lots of people out there giving advice about money. And while many people have got opinions, that doesn't mean you should be taking their advice. So please tell us a little bit about you first, about your background and why you're qualified to advise us on money matters.
Oh, certainly. Look, I guess I've been dealing with money matters my whole life. And from a really young age, I was quite tapped into thinking about money. I tell a story in my book, Michael, about sort of the first time I really recognised money became an issue at home. And I grew up in a family, sort of 3 generations of builders and plumbers. And, you know, the clients used to call on the phone and ask for help with all their plumbing needs and building needs. And I'd be the first person to run to my dad and say, hey, Dad, I've got a great job for you. So I was really sort of manning the phones from a really young age. But I realised even then, you know, my parents had the accountant come to home back in those days. And I thought, geez, you know, every business owner needs an accountant. In fact, everyone needs an accountant. So I was set on a career path from probably the age of 10. I just thought no one's going to AI an accountant. Or maybe Xero's done some of it, but not from an advisory perspective. So, yeah, I just set on a career path to be an accountant, and I went to the biggest firms because I learned very quickly that there was the greatest training provided there. And I've just had an incredible journey throughout, so 30 years working predominantly across Deloitte and other Big Four firms who I won't mention today.
Mm-hmm. I can understand why.
Yes. But 20 years as a partner at Deloitte certainly set me up nicely to be able to have money conversations. And I have essentially been advising people about money challenges my whole life. And I've gained a lot of experience with working with lots of different families and business owners. Yes, so I feel like I'm really well qualified to be talking about money and certainly helping people navigate challenge, which I love complexity, and that's what I've specialised in.
Well, you've written a book, Stop Worrying About Money, and I want to speak about that and learn a few things about that in a moment. But maybe we should start off with, what are some of the biggest financial mistakes that you see people making?
Sure. So look, there's 3 obvious money mistakes that people make, and then there's a plethora of other things that people. So why don't we let's just talk about 3 simple ones that I think is good for people listening, because they can say, yes, that's me, no, that's not me, and move on to the next one. But I think the first one I talk about is people wearing and driving their money. So naturally, it's like when people live beyond their means. So it's quite easy today to lease a car, for example. But my question would be, could you buy the car outright? And possibly the answer is no, but leasing seems to fit within your monthly income or salary, so therefore you can lease a car. People like to keep up with trends, perhaps not the Kardashians anymore, but essentially people like to wear the latest fashion, and it might not even be that. Maybe we don't use the things that we've got super well anyway, and we've sort of, I guess, now participate in a culture of a lot of abundance. There's things coming at you every day. It's very easy to buy now. So I think it's really easy to fall into that sort of trap. So that's really the first one. The second one is that people do nothing. So it's not uncommon for people, or certainly someone in a relationship, to put their head in the sand when it comes to money matters. And it's quite often delegated. So what's happening to you throughout this process is, if you've delegated financial matters to somebody or someone you're in a relationship with, is your financial literacy is dropping. And in fact, Australians' financial literacy has gone backwards over the last 5 years, quite significantly. And I find that every time you don't pay a bill, you don't go to the shops, actually what happens is your financial literacy continues to drop. So it puts you on the back foot. And if something goes wrong, and if one of those mishaps in life, or ups and down, or you get divorced, or whatever it might be, is on your plate, you'll find it very difficult to navigate your way through that without having a baseline level of financial literacy.
Well, that's a real problem in Australia. I guess it's a real problem around the third world anyway, the developed world, where financial literacy is falling further behind, and it's creating the haves and the have-nots based on what they know. They understand the rules of the game, and there are rules, aren't there, that you've got to know?
Yeah, certainly. Look, the sad thing is we don't teach it at school. And I know that the enrolments in economic degrees, for example, have actually dropped back as well. So there's definitely, perhaps people aren't building those skills essentially, and they're not having people around them with those skills, which is another issue.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment, but I guess
should.
You learn that from your parents and things they've said, things you experience, things you see them do. And many of our money mentors when we're young don't teach us good habits. And in fact, they learn their habits from their parents. So it goes on, doesn't it? But
yeah, it's a really important one. Sorry, Michael, that was 2 years. And I was going to go on to the third one. But
what was the third one?
Well, the third one is that you don't actually know what the baseline costs are at your house. So I open the book essentially by saying to people, please understand your open the front door costs. So that's about when people are opening their front door at home, what is it costing? The rent or the mortgage, the electricity, all the rates, all the subscriptions, all the things that make that household work. It's really important that every family actually has a really good understanding of their baseline costs. And I talk about baseline because you have your open your front door, and then you have the other costs of living, such as holidays or other gifts, Christmas shopping, whatever it might be. It's important to understand those as well. But people forget to recognise that baseline, and then they suffer from good old-fashioned expense creep. A phenomenon, unfortunately, that we all suffer from, which is our income goes up and so do our expenses. Now, I was asked the question last week, whether you earn $1 million or $100,000, what's the difference? I said, well, maybe nothing, or people will still worry about money, because the reality is the people on the million versus the 100 are still living to that income. So their expenses have crept up to match that. You think about things, Michael, like a bottle of wine. When you finish school, you were buying a bottle of Lambrusco for $4.95. Perhaps now you're buying a $25, $50, expensive bottle of wine. Same with the types of, I'm talking about alcohol because I could just go on with those analogies.
Sure. No, I fully agree with you, and we see that all the time. So you get a better job, so then you think you need a nicer car and you need finer clothes. And then you buy a home, and so suddenly your mortgage costs go up as well. And then you go through your asset reallocation program and you lose it all. And or you decide to start off a business, so then you end up having a whole lot of costs as well. So interestingly, what you're saying is you should be treating your home expenses, your home finances, a bit like a business would. In other words, understanding what your fixed costs are and what your discretionary spending could be.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And some people might feel that that's a lot clearer to them in acknowledging that, because it's quite easy to think that it's almost a given, these open the front door costs, but they're actually not. There's a lot of flexibility in them. And I have been in situations where, sadly, people are living beyond their means to such an extent that I've had to say, actually, this house doesn't fit. This doesn't fit your lifestyle, your financial goals. Like, you'll never get there. You'll essentially be under this debt shadow, if you like, for the rest of your life.
The problem is people see others, especially on social media nowadays, and they see the highlight reels rather than the bits on the cutting room floor, and people want to be like the others. Okay, it's not the Kardashians, or it may not even be people on TV, but your friends. They drive nice cars, but you don't really know what's going on with their finances. And I see this all the time too. Just because you've got a high income doesn't actually mean that you've got much savings or investing, does it?
No, it can be very misleading. And a great example of that that's been quite public in the last year is the downfall of Melissa Caddick, the financial advisor. And so she went out of her way to produce an image of wealth to her victims, and she did it very successfully. And you know, it's often a bit of a tangent, but one of the things I talk about, and it was something you mentioned right at the start, was talking about trust and people that you go to when you're making financial decisions. But one of the things I say is really important is that you have a great, well, I call it a personal finance village, but a group of people around you that can help you make sound financial decisions that have the right qualifications as well.
Sure, that makes sense. Now, you've written a book, Stop Worrying About Money. What inspired you to do that?
Well, it does come from a place or a person who has worried about money in their lifetime. So I certainly always worried about being able to provide for my young family. And I got divorced just under the age of 40, and essentially my wealth dissipated to essentially zero. So I was starting again after having a really reasonably successful career, but I had a young family to raise. So for me, the most important thing was about financial security. So I did worry about money, but I went about the process quite methodically, as you expect somebody who understands money, how they go about it. But I did little things like making sure that there was insurance in place. So if something happened to me, my kids would be able to be taken care of. Made sure my will was up to date. So all those details were there. I made sure that I was conservatively spending money so that I could ensure that my children's education would continue to be paid for. All these types of things. It was quite a significant financial burden. So it certainly came from a place where I used to worry. I was a busy young executive with 3 children at that time. Now we've got 5 in a blended family. So big kids come with big costs. And it's different when you're not sharing it with someone, obviously, if you go through a divorce. So it came from a place of worrying about money, but I think the reality is that I've worked out how not to worry about it. And that's through a lot of the methods that I cover in the book as well.
Well, we'll ask about those in a moment. But you're a wealth management specialist. What do you find your wealthy clients get right when it comes to financial security that the average Australian doesn't?
Well, it goes a little bit back to the point before. They have a great network, Michael, so they actually have good people around them. They do, when they've got a lot of money, tend to bet the farm too. Sometimes they take slightly bigger bets than other people might. So they're, from a risk perspective, I think their tolerance is higher. Not all, but I would say generally. They have a great network. Perhaps the thing that they don't get right, though, is that network is not shared necessarily with the next generation. So, for example, their children might actually not have access to the same advisors that they have around them. So they've got the money to pay to have that great personal finance village around them. They've got accountants, lawyers, financial advisors, you name it, surrounding them. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the next generation. In fact, less likely at all. Interesting.
So at the moment, there's a lot of people suffering with a cost of living crunch. The rents have gone up, or the interest on their mortgages has gone up, the cost of living has gone up, and wages don't seem to have kept up. What advice would you give to somebody at the moment who's having some financial challenges?
Well, I think the most critical thing is to understand what your costs are first. So go back to that first step, understand what your open the front door costs are. Now, all the business owners here won't like me saying this, but if you're an employee, you must ask for a pay rise, and it should be 7%. Essentially. So that's an important thing, is to actually ask. The other thing is talking about money. One of the things that maybe is not common is talking about money in the family. So it's a really valuable conversation to have if you're running a household, to talk about money. So not so much to make people worry, but to normalise the concept of talking about money. And so that goes to the question, or goes to the issue, I think, these days when we have packages turning up at the front door all the time, that creates almost a misunderstanding of how much money we might have. So how we spend as role models, how we spend is an important benchmark for our family members. So it's good to be able to explain that as well.
Well, COVID taught us to get things online. I remember somebody cleverly saying I live in Melbourne where we were locked down for, over 260 days. Mm-hmm. And they were saying there are two sorts of days during COVID, the days you went to the front door to get something you bought online, and the other days where you actually threw out things you bought online that you didn't really need. But it sounds a bit like budgeting, what you're talking about, or the start of a budget. Is that what you're talking about? People don't like the B word.
No, and I don't use it, and I'm quite careful not to, Michael. So I think budget frightens people. It also eeks of Excel spreadsheets. But really what I'm talking about is getting out the back of an envelope, essentially, and documenting for yourself just information to tell you at a point in time what all your costs are. Because you very quickly can see what the costs are. You can easily go online to your banking these days, pull up a CSV file or equivalent of what your outgoings are for the month. You can look at all of that and say, oh dear, my income is X, the outgoings are Y. There's a problem, or there's not enough of a gap there, which in turn isn't creating like a savings buffer.
So it's important to have a buffer, something we talk about all the time as well as an investor, but also for your home budget. And you brought up something a moment ago that I think a lot of people at times like this are letting go, and that's the concept of insurance or risk, where in fact only over the last couple of months, two of our close friends have had some terrible accidents, one a bad accident, another one a bad health event. And that's when insurance really protected them and their families.
Yeah, that's right. And look, again, if you go back to the financial literacy conversation, if a close family member has had something go wrong and you've had to step in to help them out, it's good that you're developing or building your financial acumen so that you can help them out. Because in times of illness or sickness, essentially, or death even worse, you need to focus on these things, and you need to navigate your way through insurance policies and talking to people. It can be quite overwhelming.
Now, you talked a minute ago about a financial village. What's all that about?
Well, the most important thing to me is making sure that I've got people around me that I trust.
Who should that be? What sort of people are in your village?
It's a good question. Well, for me, I have a couple of people in my village. So I do have my own accountant, which is someone in our accounting firm, so that makes sense. But it's important that I have somebody who's got really deep technical expertise on tax matters, for example. So I'm of a tax background, but I don't specialise in that like I used to. So I have somebody I can tap into like that. I have a lawyer who did my estate planning or my will, for example, who I only talk to from time to time, and usually I reconnect when my circumstances have changed. The other person, I do have a financial advisor, so somebody who manages some money for me, somebody who I've thoroughly checked out, so to speak, so made sure that their qualifications are real, their license is real, but also have a track record of supporting people like myself. And then the other person I have, and I've had from time to time throughout my career, is a coach. So I have a business coach or a personal coach, really, somebody who was one of the people who inspired me to write my book, actually, was sort of when I said I've got all this money wisdom I'd like to share with people. And I didn't want to feel like a bit of a cliche, but it just made sense. The best way to share it was to put it in a book. So that to me is that village, a group of people like a sounding board. And the whole purpose of having the village around you is so that you don't fall into the trap of, listening to people suggesting something's a good investment and picking up that thread and thinking, oh, yes, that's me, I'll do that. Or if you fall into, you think, again, I raised the Melissa Caddick story, for example, but some of the people that, became too personal, the relationship, but there wasn't a third party overseeing what was going on there. Yeah, so trying to keep that separation, if you like, of the emotion as well. So naturally with investing, emotion, or with family in particular as well, emotion can come into it. So it's great to have somebody who's independent of that to guide you as well when you're making pretty significant financial decisions.
Sure. Well, I agree with you that it's important to have a team around you to protect you, to see your blind spots. And I've always
Exactly.
had a business coach and advisors as well. Now, we started to say a little bit earlier on that we got a lot of our financial education from our parents, things they said or didn't say. Often they didn't talk about it, or things that you saw them do because the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, or things you experienced. How does one talk to one's kids about money?
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded question, but I think the number one thing is you do need to be talking to kids about money, depending on what age they are, Michael, as well. I think the conversation about money should start really early. And even if it's not so much about the price of eggs per se, it's actually about acknowledging that today, you think about parenting today, you basically tap for anything you want to buy. You tap. And I think for a young child, growing up, that's all they see. But perhaps the connection needs to be made between the grocery store tapping experience and you disappearing to work each day. You need to actually make that connection with kids. And I think you do need to take them through a process of taking them into a supermarket and showing them what's on the shelf, showing them how you make that decision around price and then how you pay for it. And the fact that you go to work the next day makes all that marry up.
I'm sure the tapping has meant that kids don't really fully understand the concept of money that you and I grew up with, getting a bit of pocket money and saving a little bit of money and putting it aside. So, Jackie, you gave us some advice, I guess that more related to younger kids, taking them to supermarkets, showing them things. But what about older kids, teenagers, kids who are on their iPhones the whole time?
It's a great question, Michael. I think the first thing that certainly I'm sure parents are worried about is a case of affluenza in their household. And then naturally, I think this occurs from when kids are young and they do see the spending habits of their parents and they progress as to adults and no one actually ever saying no to them. So I think that's the most powerful tool we have as parents, is to say no.
Do we feel guilty when we do that?
Of course. But you've got to think this is a life lesson, right? The other important lesson, I think, for parents is to encourage their kids to get a job and to work for someone else, because there's no better boss than someone else for your children. And I think that's a great place to actually help kids set financial goals, because what they begin to see is this amount of money can buy me X, but if I save this amount of money, I can buy Y. And so you can actually start having conversations with them about recognizing, because when kids first earn their own money, independence, that they want to run off and actually spend it all. And you've got to say, well, hang on, how about we set a little financial goal for you or a savings goal, and maybe you'll match it? Because the other thing I suggest to parents is double it, match it for them if they actually reach that goal. So you're sort of setting up these good habits early on.
Well, it's interesting because Pam, my wife, printed out some money, like the old Monopoly money that she gave one of her daughters who's got 3 kids, one who wanted everything that she sees on the internet. And she's not going to be listening to that, so it's okay. And in fact, she had to do jobs, and when she did the jobs, she got the play money, so to speak, so she got the concept of what the money was.
She accumulated credit.
Yes, Pam, the grandmother, matched that when she got to a certain amount, and then they went off to buy something, so she actually had to learn delayed gratification. That's something we've got to teach our kids, isn't it?
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I'm going to leave a link in the show notes to where one can get your book, Stop Worrying About Money. But could we finish off with maybe 3 tips for our listeners as to how they can stop worrying about money?
Certainly. So I think the first one would be to own it. So recognise that there might be obstacles in the way, bad things can happen, you can make mistakes and you can move forward with money. I think that's the first one. The second one thing is own it again. So actually make a decision to understand exactly what you are spending or what's going out of your home, so that you can make a decision about what you're not going to spend money on or not falling into the trap of your wants. I think the third thing is to set a financial goal. By all means, set a goal, whether it be a life goal 3-5 years out, but actually marry that up with a financial goal as well.
So what you're really saying is take responsibility it's not going to change until you do. Your financial position's not going to get better till you become better at money and finances. So own up to your mistakes. Hey, we've all made them over the time, but we've all learned. And if you don't actually go to the trouble of becoming more financially literate, more financially fluent, your financial situation isn't going to change. But I think the great thing in Australia, Jackie, is there are opportunities. If you lived in some of the underdeveloped countries, unfortunately, there's very little chance of getting to the next level financially. But here we're living in the best country in the world at the best time in history. We've got the opportunity of getting control of our finances, haven't we?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We certainly are an affluent society. There are opportunities out there for everyone. You can have a job, you can have a side hustle, you can work flexibly. There is opportunity here, there's no question.
Fantastic. Well, I hope your book, Stop Worrying About Money, does well. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes where people can find out more about you and get a copy of your book, either the hard copy or online. And thank you for teaching us about how to stop worrying about money.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group? Go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?